My name is Brittany Palmer. I work with the North Missoula Community Development Corporation in Missoula, Montana, and I'm your room host for the breakout session. We're super excited that all of you have joined us today and would like to give a special thank you to Parson Bill and Latimer Law Firm for sponsoring this session. Please, as you get into the room, mute your lines and use the chat function if you have any questions. And we'll try to address all the questions before the end of the session. So get your questions into the chat as they come up. Also, just a reminder that all of the sessions are being recorded. So please also keep your video off while the presenters are presenting. That just helps with like some Wi-Fi issues. And then you're super welcome to turn your video on for the Q&A. So when you, if you want to chat something into the full group, just make sure that you click all panelists and attendees. And then also to just test that right now, we can do a quick practice. So if you want to click down at the bottom of your screen, everyone in the chat function, you can say who you are, where you're coming from, and what organization. Okay. Also, if you want to play around with the whiteboard you received in the mail, if you find something inspiring or new, you can feel free to write something on the whiteboard and hold it up. And with that, I will turn it over to our presenters and let them introduce themselves. So first we have Bridget, and I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, it's lovely to see everyone today and to be a part of this. I'm Bridget Wilkinson. I'm the president and CEO of the One Valley Community Foundation, and I'm joined today by my colleague Tanya Andreasen, our community engagement manager at the One Valley Community Foundation. So we will be your team today. Wonderful. Well, I will go ahead and get started. We are excited to be with you and to share a little bit about our work and how we are within Gallatin County. All right. So with the One Valley Community Foundation, our mission is to connect people who care to causes that matter to build a better community. And One Valley has been supporting our county of Gallatin County, Montana, in southwestern Montana since 1998. So just to give you a little bit of information about what a community foundation is, the definition is that a community foundation is a public charity that focuses on supporting a single geographic area. So for us, Gallatin County in southwest Montana, primarily by facilitating and pooling donations, charitable giving, used to address community needs and to support local nonprofits. So that's at a really high level about what a community foundation is. And so typically, community foundations are really known for the philanthropic resources that we can provide our region. And historically, community foundations have been seen as really like community charitable savings banks, where people set up funds at the community foundation, and then we help grant those dollars out to community needs. So in other words, you can kind of think of us as a community philanthropic matchmaker. It's a lot of fun. But the One Valley Community Foundation, we are trying to really extend that historical definition of a community foundation by engaging in support and capacity development for our county's nonprofit sector, and by playing a convening and public education role around issues that are really important to our neighbors, like housing and affordability. So we encourage you to work with your local or regional community foundation to learn about how they might contribute to the important work that you're doing around housing issues. So today we're going to share with you a little bit about how we're doing that work. So with the One Valley Community Foundation, we believe in the power of all people to make a difference in our communities. We're doing this work because we deeply believe that when our region works together in a cross-sector effort, that we can address really hard things together. So no one or community entity can address community issues like housing on their own, as you all know. And as a response to the growing need in our communities for housing solutions, One Valley has launched its regional housing initiatives. So each of these initiatives that we're going to talk a little bit about today builds upon and informs the other initiatives and are really meant to fill a gap in what our county is doing to address housing affordability and availability needs. So One Valley is leveraging what we're good at, which is convening people and helping our community have complex conversations. So there are nonprofit providers and developers, local governments, and private home builders and the housing industry all working to create solutions. And although that great work is being done around Gallatin County, coordinated action, resources, and communication are not necessarily happening. So the One Valley Community Foundation is working with the public and private partners in many different ways to address housing needs. So this includes a regional housing study, our A Seat at the Table initiative, and a convening of a regional housing coalition. So Tanya will give a little bit more information about each one of these initiatives a little bit later in this conversation. And so just to start out, why regional housing initiatives? So in 2018, the One Valley Community Foundation hosted an initiative called A Seat at the Table. And A Seat at the Table is a proven civic engagement event that inspires community members to engage in local decision-making. So One Valley hosted this first event in order to gather community perspectives on what people loved about their communities and what they were concerned about. A Seat at the Table was actually modeled after the Chicago Trust's On the Table annual community conversation initiative. So to sum it up, in one day, we asked community members throughout Gallatin County to come together in small groups in their homes, schools, faith communities, parks, nonprofits, even in our detention center, to answer 3 questions about their community. What do they love most about their community? What is their greatest challenge living in their community? And what's one idea they had to make their community a better place? So we aggregated all of that data in partnership with Montana State University and reported it back to city and county leaders. And at our inaugural A Seat at the Table event in 2018, 74% of participants said that housing is the most pressing need in our county. Elected officials, employers, nonprofit providers, and home builders sometimes struggle with understanding the needs of individual community members. This gap in understanding meant that decisions made about policy and funding and programs were not always informed by the lived experience of our neighbors and their community voice. And so knowing this, One Valley Community Foundation was catalyzed to act. So we hired community engagement manager, Tanya Andreasen, and launched our regional housing initiatives to be responsive to what the county was telling us was our most pressing challenge. And so as a part of those housing-focused initiatives, we chose to host a second round of A Seat at the Table community conversations. So with the One Valley Community Foundation, we know that stories are so powerful, especially your own story. And whenever we're talking about housing, it feels like we are talking about people often in the form of statistics. And we wanted to really humanize people's stories and their own lived experiences. And in today's world, the innovative act of simply coming together has never been more important. So having face-to-face conversations, talking and listening to our neighbors, we knew was an important first step towards creating a more connected and engaged community, especially around such a hot topic like housing. So in response to that 2018 outcome of what the community had said was the greatest challenge, which was housing, and to gather needed ideas and data from community members, we intentionally designed our second A Seat at the Table conversation in 2021 to focus conversations on solution ideas for housing affordability and attainability for those who live, work, and do business in Gallatin County. Local leaders and funders are challenged by allocating scarce resources to addressing housing needs of our community members. The results of A Seat at the Table give local government and local other leaders diverse, broad, and rich public input about housing needs and ideas for local solutions. How we did this work is what we're here to discuss with you all today. And we hope that you will take what is helpful home to your own community and consider engaging your neighbors in some seat at the table conversations. So please know that throughout this conversation, after this conversation, Tanya and myself are happy to be a resource about how we've done the work that we've done. And we'd love to learn from you too and what you're learning in your communities. So I will pass it off to my teammate, Tanya, to take this conversation the next leg of the race. Tanya, you're on mute.
Sorry, folks. I'm the only semi-competent wizard behind the curtains today. I've got two screens and everything is all kind of wobbly while I'm screen sharing. So thanks, Bridget, for the handoff. Essentially, I want to introduce myself and then talk a little bit about the building blocks of our housing initiatives. And we're definitely here to focus on seat at the table, but we have a couple of other things that we want to talk about as well that we think would be helpful in any community, small or large, that takes on this initiative. So first, I am Tanya. I'm the Community Engagement Manager here at One Valley Community Foundation. I saw Rebecca Stansel pop into the audience. And I just wanted to say hello because we worked at Word, I think 20 something years ago now in Missoula. So hey, Rebecca. I worked at the city of Bozeman for a while doing community engagement and housing work. And I'm happy to be at One Valley Community Foundation now, managing some of the work that we're doing around housing and affordability issues in our county. So first of all, we kind of with our ear to the ground, we realized that a lot of the conversations about housing were really sometimes informed by old data or inaccurate data, a little bit of fake news and conjecture. So we pulled together a housing study, and this study is divided up into these sections that you see here in front of you. It's available on our website if anybody's interested. But essentially, in order to elevate those conversations that are happening on the bar stools or around the kitchen table, or even in at the dais and in boardrooms of large employers, we wanted to make sure that those conversations were really structured and informed by data instead of fake news or high emotion. And so basically we pulled together this housing study using publicly available data. The way that we structured it was to really talk about language first, so that we created shared language about housing. There's some confusing concepts and terms around housing, and we thought that was a good place to start. And then we sort of had our report chunked up into problems, solutions, and strategies. So you'll see here, this is kind of a cover sheet for our sections. And then each of these sections is followed by a one-pager with really consumable data. So if you look at the middle red square there, it's about housing affordability. And not that you can see this super clearly on your screen, but this is an example of that kind of one pager that we're talking about. And so, for example, the upper right graphic is about how wages in yellow are not keeping up with home sale and rental rate increases. The next section of the report is challenges. Again, this is all publicly available through our MLS and the census data, American Community Survey. And anybody can do this in their own community. Doesn't have to be structured this way, but we found it really helpful to present it in a pretty consumable and one-stop shopping kind of format. So these, I just wanted to kind of whiz through these examples so that you could sort of see how we structured it and land on this strategies page. This is how we ended our housing study. And the reason this is important for seat at the table is that our committee, and I'll talk about that in a minute, really wanted to, I guess, provide a place to start, because housing conversations and housing solutions are really hard. And these conversations are not being had by experts or housing industry workers, but instead regular old people like you and me. And we wanted to make sure that there was a resource, a place to start for conversations. And so the final page of our housing study were these strategies. These are legal, except inclusionary zoning is now illegal under regulatory tools. But these were used to inform and be a place to start for seat at the table conversations. And I'll show you how we did that in just a minute. So the regional housing study supported our work in a few ways. We needed an in. We needed a reason to go talk to governments, planning boards, nonprofit leaders, employers, et cetera. And the housing study was sort of I don't know, a tool, a marketing tool, but also just sort of something to begin conversations. And that was really helpful when we were developing buy-in for seat at the table and some of the other work that we're participating in the county. We hope that it was also a really good way to start talking about our regional housing coalition, which is how we'll sort of wind up our conversation here today. I'll give you a little bit more information on that. You can see here that I have a video. It's a PSA, and I'm going to show it really quick. It's Bridget's voice, and it's a 1-minute PSA that we use to just show our community what seat at the table is and to welcome their voices into the initiative.
A seat at the table is really designed to elevate community voice. This year, we are focusing our conversations on housing and affordability because we know that that's the most pressing topic of our community right now. We know that people closest to challenges in our community are also closest to solutions. We want a seat at the table to be an accessible opportunity to come together and to gather with friends, maybe some neighbors, or maybe some strangers, people that you haven't met yet, about some tough topics in our community, and to show up as yourself, to bring your own lived experience to the table. Because really it's through listening and conversation and dialogue that we really get to know each other as a community and understand how issues are impacting everyday community members. And that's why we're hosting a seat at the table, for all of us to come together and to be a part of the solutions.
Great. So I'm just going to scooch on to the next slide here and talk about the way that we approach the seat at the table initiative was underpinned by two beliefs. One is that data is a community asset. It's not just for experts, it's for anybody. We really wanted to make sure that not only was the information that we were providing the hosts and participants of the initiative accessible and understandable, but also when we looped back to our community members, that the outcomes, the product of this initiative were also presented very in an easy to understand way and a useful way. The second belief that we started from is that stories are data. Metrics are important, of course they are, but the lived experiences and the ideas in our community members' own words are also data, and those should be amplified to the attention of our decision makers. So I'm going to linger on the slide for just a second because these are kind of the nuts and bolts pieces of our initiative. So if I were starting from scratch, these are sort of the main headers in my project plan. The first thing that we did is we created a volunteer committee. Combined with One Valley staff time, we asked a committee of dedicated volunteers to help us think through from the very beginning to the actual implementation of the event and the reporting out of the data to help us make sure that we were reaching the people that we wanted to reach and including them, welcoming them, and that we were sort of on track with what we were hoping, what we were setting out to do. And what we were setting out to do is to bring solution ideas, not just stories of need, but solution ideas to address need to the attention of decision makers for policy, funding, et cetera. So in the second bullet point, I wrote down community partner mapping. Our volunteer committee was really instrumental in that. And community partner mapping is probably labeled something else, but done by all of you. And it is basically where we sat down and very intentionally thought about who we wanted to reach in our geography, but also in the different sectors of our economy and the people in our population here. And we wanted to make sure that we were not only targeting our marketing so that we welcomed anybody and everybody to participate, but that we also thought about how to structure our event so that we were inclusive and accessible to people that might not have Wi-Fi, for example, or might work long days. We wanted to make sure that we were reaching people who had needs that aren't traditionally met with public engagement initiatives. And our volunteer committee was very instrumental in using their own networks and their own knowledge of our county and our community to make sure that we did our best job to make good on that word. They also really helped us with sponsorship. And when I show you our website really quick, you'll see that we had a pretty diverse set of public and private sponsors. And that was really due to our committee, and that helped us fund this initiative. So the questionnaire and note taking, that is the way that we captured our data. And I promise this is the longest that will linger on one slide, but it is sort of the nuts and bolts slide. The questionnaire and note taking was developed with some folks at Montana State University. We basically wanted to make sure that not only were we capturing demographic and sort of some quantitative data, but that we were also producing an event or an initiative where we could capture stories. And so that really was about training our hosts, our volunteer hosts, and we had about 80 of those sessions. So that's a lot of volunteer hosts. We help them learn how to take notes and make sure that we were capturing stories during those conversations. We made sure that our marketing, again, was pretty diverse and crossed different modes of communication. We created a fact sheet, a one-pager. I'll show you that here in a second, and gave personal presentations. We did, I think, a pretty good job of training our hosts just with a Zoom, recorded Zoom webinar that Bridget did. And we provided them a toolkit and lots of support so that they felt comfortable hosting their 1-hour conversations and doing the note taking and data collection. And then we made a welcome video. And I'm going to show you the welcome video really quick and then give you a little bit of a tour of our website. The welcome video is, I think it's almost 5 minutes long, but I think that you'll see in there how we used our regional housing study especially that strategies page to inform the conversation. This is the video that was shown at the beginning of every single seat at the table conversation this last fall.
At this point, you've decided to take the time to attend a seat at the table conversation about housing and housing solutions. We just really want to make sure all of you who are out there behind your computer screen or attending a session in a public meeting room in a library or wherever you may be meeting, that you really understand how crucial it is that you've made the time to participate in a seat at the table conversation.
If you get enough people in your community involved, you're going to find some solutions to the problems we have. And it's best if it does come from the ground up, because then everybody's buying into it.
We're trying to make sure the experience that you and I have in our own homes, in our own working lives, that those experiences are bubbled up to the conversations that decision makers are having here in our county.
I really think that the only way, our heads here that make the decisions can hear about specific stories of families is by people talking and explaining and sharing their experience.
The public sector, like our elected officials and city and county administrators, but also large and small employers, people making decisions about wages, hiring, and about how to do business in Gallatin County.
This would be the perfect opportunity to use your voice and your story and just be honest, and that could encourage someone else. It's almost like a ripple effect.
We're very lucky here in Gallatin County to have such a robust and vital nonprofit sector. The leaders that make up that nonprofit sector really need to hear from each of us who live, work, and do business here in Gallatin County about our lived experiences with housing.
Just like childcare alone, it's a good chunk of your paycheck. Like, you're practically working just for somebody to take care of your kids.
Stories that are going to be coming out of these individual conversations.
If you cannot pay your rent or you cannot afford your mortgage,
will be compiled, and all of that information will be turned around and presented to local leadership.
We're hearing from neighbors that are asking how they can be a part of solutions that mean that their neighbors can stay in the neighborhood.
We're looking for those ideas that maybe we haven't heard or maybe we haven't even given any thought to. And so that's one of the things that we're really hoping to come out of these sessions is new ideas and maybe new solutions for a big problem.
We hope that you've had the opportunity to take some time to check out the A Seat at the Table website. It's chock full of resources. One of those resources is the Regional Housing Study that was just published at the end of the summer. That study is a compilation of all kinds of data that describes housing and affordability in Gallatin County. Some of the data points that came out of that study are what we hope will inform the conversations that you'll be having today. For example, the land, labor, and materials, fees, etc., results in our elevated housing prices here in Gallatin County. Another finding, homes are not necessarily where the jobs are, and that leads to a big increase in commuting. And commuting costs are expensive. Another finding, wages are going up, but the cost of housing is going up way faster. The way that this is going to work tonight is that your host is already trained up on how to guide the conversation and make sure all voices are heard at the table. 3 questions will be posed of the entire group. Based on your experiences with housing in our community, what are your thoughts and ideas about how to address housing issues? What are you willing to do to support these initiatives or ideas? What roles can different groups play to address different parts of the problem? After the conversation that you engage in today, we'll ask you to participate in a questionnaire. It should take you about 10 minutes. That collection of data and stories will be turned back around for local leaders in our nonprofit sector and our public and private sectors. And what you can expect is that One Valley Community Foundation and its partners are committed to providing ongoing opportunities for contribution of your ideas and opportunities for action around solutions to housing issues in Gallatin County. Thank you very much for taking the time to be here.
Okay. Thanks for allowing me to sort of take up 5 whole minutes of our time here. But I think that was a really good summary of how the sessions actually worked and how we got them started. So these are the 3 questions that conversation host posed. And the way that the conversation started is that basically the host, probably a person familiar to the people at the table, posed these questions throughout the hour and then let the conversation sort of flow. Somebody is off mute, just so you know. So once the once the data was compiled, we sort of realized that we had these 8 common threads. And again, this resource is on our website if you'd like to see the whole report. But it was really important for us to sort of extract the common threads and the major takeaways so that we had sound bites that we could deliver back to our government entities and our private partners. These are the major findings that came out of the session. And I just realized I forgot to give you a tour of the website. I'm gonna go through this slide and then I'm gonna pop back to the website really quick. So complex, interconnected, and countywide. That's kind of how we were left after everything was said and done. People really told us that in many different ways that coordination, cooperation among public and private diverse partners are really critical to identifying and implementing solutions. We also heard from people that they want to help and contribute to address housing, but they don't really know how. For us at One Valley Community Foundation, this is a little bit of a call to action. There are people out there that want to help or contribute, but if they don't know how, they aren't going to be able to do it. So it's up to people like us who have a broad and diverse audience and a means for communication to try to help people understand what those things could be. Community members expect leadership from governments. I think that that is maybe a little bit of an obvious statement, but I really think that there was a major expression that they hope that employers and private entities like banks, developers, realtors, and property managers also come to the table for solution making, coordinated solution making. And the fourth takeaway, that no single solution will resolve the housing issues our community faces, that those diverse strategies and implementation ideas are going to be the most effective. So I'm going to pop back to our website. I apologize for popping back and forth, but if you just bear with me for a second, we created a website, and this is sort of after the event. Before the event, this was the place where we just really drove people so that they could watch the PSA, they could get information if they were a participant, a host, a potential donor or sponsor, or an ambassador for our initiative. We had a resource page where people could download things like our fact sheet, social media posts, and the housing study itself. This is the fact sheet that I had referred to before. And this was a really great thing that we suggest anybody who wishes to replicate this kind of broad scale community initiative. It was very helpful to have a one-pager. We could print it and leave it with folks if they were curious in the many different ways that they could be participants. So if you decide to do this in your own community, large or small, potentially you could look at the headers and fill in your own information about how to make it work in your own community. So it's kind of the who, what, when, where, and why responses. And then sort of at the end here, we had the 4 ways that people could participate. And lots of folks found that very, very useful. We had a media section. We worked very closely with our media and made sure that they had access and understanding of the timeline because we really wanted to be inclusive of the different forms of traditional media all over our county, the larger and sort of more mainstream resources, but also from the smaller community newspapers and newsletters, et cetera. So in the end, when you think about that last page of the housing study, those strategies were sort of chunked up into headers. And so what the community conversations were, they were provided these 5 major buckets of solution strategies. And so a lot of the questions in the questionnaire were sort of grouped around these strategies. And that's the way that we got solution ideas. In the outcomes report, we have these solution idea pages, and they're divided up by government, employer, individuals, private housing industry members, et cetera. And so these solution idea pages provide direct quotations from community members and participants that are directed towards those decision makers. Again, one of those major findings is that people felt pretty hopeless and overwhelmed. And so because of that, we produced a second type of outcome from our Seat at the Table initiative, and that was housing solutions in action. And all this is one page front and back. Again, you can find it on our website, and it's a list of things that are going on. Those are the headers or categories of work. Those headers or categories are probably things that are happening in your own community. And so it was just a way for us to give folks a little bit of an understanding of what is happening around solution making for housing all around the county. And we found this to be a really welcome piece of communication. People are really excited to see this, and it has actually provided some hope and great conversations. So I'll leave you with our Regional Housing Coalition idea, the building blocks of producing the housing report and then hosting this community conversation initiative, and then moving into our next stage of forming a regional housing coalition. All of those building blocks are leading us to the point where we are going to gather public and private partners to identify some shared priorities. Could be 1, 2, it could be up to 5. And we'll convene those partners quarterly in order to advance solutions. This is sort of the idea of collective impact, if any of you work with collective impact framework. And it is about the cooperation and coordination of assets, ideas, and certainly coordinating across sectors. And these are the actions and influences that we hope to produce from our regional housing initiatives, that we elevate public and private partnerships, that we pool funding and resources, that we create some shared knowledge and understanding around the complex issues of housing. We find some innovative approaches to solutions, and that policies and decisions are aligned with actual need in our community. And that's our last slide.
Yes, I think at this point, we would love to hear from you. What are questions that you have and ways that we can support you? We know we've thrown a lot at you today. So whether you are submitting questions via chat or you're welcome to come off mute and simply ask us your questions that way, and we'll do our best to answer them. Who's going to be brave? Gina, do you have a question?
No, sorry. I didn't realize I was off mute. So
no worries.
Thank you for your presentation.
You are welcome.
You all can feel free to turn your videos on at this point too for our conversation.
Great. We do have a question in the chat. Thank you so much, Andrew, for submitting that. Andrew Wright's question is, how do you get the county commissioners to buy in? They are opposing us at every crossroads. Tanya, do you want to start that? And I'm happy to fill in that too.
Sure. I would say in many different ways, it's about taking the time for relationship making, and that's a little bit of stating the obvious, and I'm sure that you're doing that as well. Our county commissioners are also in a position of hearing from our private and public sectors, our partners here in the county, that they need help in a way that's different from 5, 10, and 20 years ago. So the time is right in some ways for our county. And I'm not sure where you're from, Andrew, but I would say it's a combination of an expression from a lot of different places, a lot of different people that are saying that they would like leadership. And so that's one of the ways. The other thing that has happened is that one of the county staff, a planner, has coordinated a cross-jurisdiction and cross-organizational learning group about housing. I was one of 7 people that attended a Housing Solutions Network training last fall. We applied for it and got a seat. And that sort of national level training took us, I think there were 8 2-hour sessions. It was a pretty big commitment. And so from within the county's organization itself, there started to be buy-in for creating a housing strategy. And that has helped a lot as well. It's just sort of created an understanding for me and others that are outside the organization of the county what their limitations are, because there are many. They have a lot to contend with, and I'm learning all the time the magnitude of what that is, and that's helpful because it creates a little bit of shared understanding around the complexities of what they can and can't do. So that sort of internal buy-in, cross-organizational work, relationship building, and also just that they're hearing from all kinds of people in the community that they would like and even expect leadership from our county government.
Yeah, I would echo what Tanya said. That part of the role of seat at the table, as we talked about, is really amplifying that community voice, and for our public officials to be able to hear that lived experience, and once again to humanize that data. So I think that's been our approach, is saying, we're not creating a to-do list for you as government officials. Rather, we want you to just hear the stories so that you also understand your impact of the work that you're doing as commissioners.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I think we have another question in the chat. Andrew, thank you for that question. This is from Kelsey Dennison. Were you able to get developers, investors, and corporate businesses to participate in this process? It's really great to have the feedback from residents and community members, but the buy-in from, quote, big influencers seems important. Tanya, you want to take that first?
Sure. I would say yes. And it's one of the things that I was most excited about, not only pre-event, but also after. We had large employers like Bozeman Health, or restaurant owners, and small employers as well. We had folks host seat at the table conversations in their staff break rooms. We had financial sponsorship from some of the larger employers, including our hospital. We had investment sort of in the form of being ambassadors for the event. For example, one of our bank presidents called down to West Yellowstone to one of his branches and, sort of sanctioned, or I don't know what the word is, but supported his employees participating in seat at the table, seat at the table conversations down there, giving them the time and sort of latitude and support to participate. And particularly there is a large Latinx population. And so one of the bank employees really helped us reach some of her community members that might not have participated had she not contacted them directly. So the answer is yes. It's not perfect, but we did get some buy-in and support in a few different ways from some of our private industry partners, including home developers, banks, a Gallatin Association of Realtors, etc.
We had a group of architects who got together as well. So yeah, I would say that we did have representations. So much of that is just about outreach and about recruiting those hosts for those tables. And so really being thoughtful about the people that you want to hear from, including those big influencers, and being mindful about reaching out to them and inviting them to participate. What are other questions?
Bridget, I think somebody had her hand raised.
Oh.
I don't see it anymore, but there was a hand raised at one point.
Yeah, I think it was Teen from Path. Did you have a question?
I was just trying to hand clap because I really liked the answer for something, but I accidentally raised my hand.
I love it. We love your enthusiasm. Enthusiasm. Okay. Any other questions? Oh, sorry, Tanya.
No, that's okay. I was just going to say, while we're waiting for other questions to maybe pop up, I went to high school in Big Timber, so that's a pretty different place than Bozeman. And while I was preparing for this session, I was thinking, you know, what would this be like in different communities, smaller communities? What would this be like if we did it at Larkspur, for example? I think there are about 300 residents who live at Larkspur and Bozeman. Could this be done on sort of in that community? So not a incorporated city, but could it be done in a different kind of community? So a smaller community like Big Timber in Montana, or a community like the residents of Larkspur? And I think the answer is yes. That's sort of the great thing about Seat at the Table. It is about breaking bread with people that you know in your community. It is about giving your voice, participating in decision-making in a really comfortable way. I have given public comment, standing up in front of elected officials, and it's nerve-wracking. I do public speaking all the time, but I totally admit it's at a time where I should be home eating dinner with my kids. It's in front of sort of this formal setting with people sitting around in front of me, and it's stressful. And so the objective, part of the objective and part of the great thing about Seat at the Table is that it's in a place where I'm comfortable. It's with people I'm comfortable with. It's being facilitated by a community member that I, very likely know. And I know that there's a promise associated with my participation, that my voice, my ideas will be leveled up. They'll be brought up and compiled and brought forward. So I think the answer is yes. This can be done in all kinds of different communities, and you don't have to have a videographer. We happen to have one, and he was doing some other fancy work with a drone for a different project that he is being paid a lot of money for. And we very, very luckily got to sort of tag on to that other existing work. And that's how we got to do some of the fancier videography work, but it certainly doesn't have to be like that.
Do we have one last question?
I did see one question in the chat function from Joseph saying, is One Valley considering expanding into other communities? And so inherently, as a community foundation, we serve one geographic area, which for us is Gallatin County in Southwest Montana. So luckily, there are amazing community foundations all throughout the state of Montana. At one point, there were 74 of us, so almost one per county. So if you're located within the state of Montana, the likelihood is high that you have a local community foundation to reach out to. If you need to be connected, feel free to reach out to us. But you can also look at the Montana Community Foundation website to see all of the community foundations throughout the state of Montana. So I'd recommend going to their website. They're kind of our statewide mothership, if you will. But hopefully you'll be able to find the community foundation located in your area that understands your local needs that you can help partner with.
And I will tag on to what Bridget is saying and say that although we aren't necessarily expanding our geography, we certainly are trying to create and share replicable work. We learn from all of you all the time. And we hope that by presenting like this and keeping our website sort of open and public, that we can share resources that make it easy for others to take what works from what we're doing and do it in your own communities.
Cool. Well, join me in thanking our presenters, and thanks to all of you for joining this session. Remember, you can always participate in these community conversations more through that Puova app, and we'll be back in about an hour after the lunch break. And so we'll look forward to having you back in breakout sessions at 1 p.m. Thanks, everybody, and thanks to our presenters.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.